Everyone. Good morning and welcome to everyone who's here today in person and for those that are joining us online. The agenda for this morning, assuming I can make this work, pointed at the right. Is there an on button here? So for this morning's agenda, there we go. We're going to go through a bit of an introduction, followed up by kind of the rate setting process, which will break down your industry premium rates, the rate model, a brief discussion about the rate model itself, and then how we've transitioned from the old model to the enhanced model. And then we'll take a few minutes to talk about next steps. I also want to take a minute to set expectations regarding the information that you're going to receive from today's presentation. We're not going to be giving you your 2019 premium rates. We will show you a comparison of your 2018 premium rate under the old model and under this enhanced model, and some information about what's driving those differences. This will give you an idea of what to expect in 2019 when the transition is removed. We're providing this information to you to give you an opportunity to plan and prepare for potential premium rate increases. We've scheduled an hour for questions following the presentation. However, depending on the number of questions, we may not have time for them all. If that's the case, you can always send questions to askwcb@wcbsask.com. So askwcb@wcbsas.com. And for those online, you can submit your questions to the same email address, and we'll try and address them during the presentation. So what actually happens with your 2019 premium rate, and I'll talk about this later, is really going to be determined based on your industry experience and to some degree what's happening with all industries overall. So what do your premium rates cover? At a very high level, as employers, you fund the compensation system and are protected from being sued if there is a workplace injury. The premiums you pay ensure that your workers are protected if they're injured on the job. They'll receive wage loss benefits, medical benefits, and rehabilitation benefits. The main objective of the rate setting process is to ensure that the overall premiums required by the WCB for the upcoming year are met. Premiums should cover all current and future costs for claims from employers during the operating year, including worker compensation costs, vocational rehabilitation benefits, health care, survivor benefits, the administration of the system, the funding of safety associations. It also ensures that the distribution of revenue requirements across all employers is equitable while maintaining collective liability. It should also promote accountability and fairness and recognize injury prevention and disability management processes. It's important to know that the two key components that factor into the calculation of premium rates are claims costs and payroll. The claims costs are simply the costs associated with workplace injuries that have occurred in the past that we use to help project future claims costs. Payroll is collected for all workers, so we use payroll to calculate the premiums, and it is collected for all workers in all industries or workplaces covered by the WCB Act. So premium rates are set based on the ratio of claims cost to payroll. The WCB is funded by the premiums employers pay and the investment income earned from those premiums. Premiums that we collect in a given year are intended to cover all costs of claims that happen in that year. So if someone is 15 and they're severely injured, we'll collect enough money in 2018 to pay for the lifetime of those claims costs. Actuarial model. We use an actuarial model to predict claims costs for the upcoming year. Actuarial models ensure financial stability and security of benefits. Costs include an industry's its own claims costs as well as their portion of the shared costs, otherwise collective liability. So your industry premium rate is really costs, again, divided by payroll. This slide depicts the timeline of events that kind of get us here today. So we went through a series of events that have ultimately led us to changes to the rate model, and then ultimately explaining the impact of those changes. So back in 2015, the WCB conducted an asset liability study through an external consultant. This study incorporated actuarial asset liability investment return projections and recommended that the WCB review its rate model and funding policy. So in 2016, as a result of the recommendations in the asset liability study, we reviewed the rate model, and it was completed by an external actuary as well. We received a report from the external actuary in September of 2016. That external actuary is called Eckler. In October of 2016, there was an introduction to the enhanced model to stakeholders during the rate setting meetings. In November and December of 2016, we did province-wide education to employers about the enhanced rate model. Then in 2017, in early 2017, we did industry rate code employer education sessions again that included information on the potential impact of moving to the enhanced rate model. We consulted with how to transition to the enhanced model. So we got employers' feedback on how to transition from the current model, what was the current model, to the enhanced model. In October, we shared information on the 2018 premium rates and the plan for transitioning to the enhanced model. In January of 2018, the enhanced model became effective. And here we are today describing to you and reinforcing what might happen in 2019 when we move fully to the enhanced model. So, quick review of some of the key principles within the enhanced model. The premium rate setting process should be about appropriately balancing what are sometimes competing principles. The rate model should be robust and sustainable, satisfying the needs, goals, and expectations of employers, while being actuarially sound, relatively simple and easy to understand, communicate, and administer, and ultimately provide for the security of benefits to injured workers. The rate model, on the one hand, there are competing principles of collective liability and accountability. Accountability is about making sure that premiums paid by current employers should cover the costs of their injured workers during the premium period. The principles covered under what is called intergenerational equity. So current employers should be paying for claims costs generated should not be paying for claims costs generated by past employers. So as a matter of fairness, right, and holding employers today accountable for their costs, we want to collect enough premiums today to cover all the costs for the injuries that happen in this year. Also, as a matter of fairness, we want to prevent intragenerational equity, which means employers that incur injuries should be responsible for the costs associated with those injuries. So of all the injuries that happen this year, or industries or employers that have more injuries, should be paying higher premiums. A fair rate model encourages workplace safety, effective return to work policies by financially incentivizing employers' positive behaviors. On the other hand, collective liability, employers as a group and those within the same industry are jointly responsible for all workers' compensation costs. Also, employers should not be excessively punished for unusually costly claims. Thus, portions of unusually costly claims should be shared by all employers. So we have these competing principles of holding industries and employers accountable, but also not overly burdening any particular group of employers for extremely rare and costly claims, which is collective liability. So we're balancing these two principles, and we've made adjustments to this model compared to the old one that creates a better balance between accountability and collective liability. On the other hand, employers want rate stability. They don't want their rates bouncing up and down from year to year excessively, but they also want reactivity. When performances get better, they want the model to react in a positive way, and if performance goes in the opposite direction, where there's higher costs and higher injuries, then they want the industries that are having more injuries and higher costs held accountable, and they want the model to react in that way. So employers should rely on a certain level of predictability and stability, which can, again, be competing principles at the same time. So to illustrate this, I often talk about the concept or the notion of your own vehicle insurance, right? So if you have a vehicle and whatever vehicle that you have, your insurance premiums, the premiums you pay for your vehicle insurance are going to be based on with other people who have similar vehicles. If you're driving a $120,000 Escalade, you're going to get lumped in with people with similar types of vehicles. If you're driving a Toyota Camry, you're going to get lumped in. So the type of vehicle you drive will determine ultimately the insurance that you pay up front, but then from there your experience will dictate whether your premiums go up or down. The more claims you have, the more you're going to pay in premiums. If you have no claims over time, your premiums are going to go down. But having said that, if for any number of reasons your vehicle gets totaled off, you're not going to be responsible for paying the full cost of that vehicle replacement. Your insurance program does. And it's a shared cost, a shared liability for all people paying into that insurance program that replaces your vehicle. WCB insurance is the same kind of concept in balancing out individual accountability versus collective liability. So at its highest level, the key drivers of premiums are still claims, costs, and payroll. The enhanced model changes the way we estimate those costs for the upcoming year. The following 6 components impact industry premium rates under the enhanced model. We'll be providing a high level of information here regarding the components of the enhanced model, as we recognize that a number of people have been through the various education sessions. So we do have more detailed information about the model that we can provide people. There's resources available online, and or if there's a need for us to come and speak to you or your workplace or a group of employers in your industry to get a more deeper knowledge of this model itself, we could always arrange for something. So the first component is credibility of industries. Credibility is the extent to which you use past experience to predict future experience. Under the current classification structure, there are a number of small industry rate codes with lower credibility, making it difficult to predict claims experience. The change that we made is for rate codes that are not fully credible, their experience should be complemented with a longer experience period. So what we're trying to do is capture a bigger pool of data for that industry's experience. So we'll use up to 10 years experience versus 5. There's some rate codes that are 100% credible using 5 years of experience. If your rate code is not credible, we'll augment it by looking at 10 years of experience. So if your rate code is an example, and I think it's originally around 75% credible on the 5-year experience, we'll use 75% of your experience for the 5 years, The other 25% will be looking at the 10-year experience to come up with enough experience for your industry to try and predict what the future costs will be. In the past, we used to use the whole board experience. So using all industries, the experience of all industries, we would supplement an industry's experience that had low credibility with the provincial experience. And that really isn't fair. Some industries were kind of winners and losers by doing that. The way we're doing it now is we're only looking at your industry experience to determine credibility. Second was the use of indicators to predict costs. The old model projected the number of time loss claims and the expected future costs associated with those claims. The concern with this method is that the number of claims has been declining. There has not been a proportionate decline in costs. So while claims are coming down fast, costs have not been coming down as fast, particularly when we talk about long-term claims. So the change is using the evolution of workforce, not the number of time loss claims, to determine the future claims costs. The evolution of workforce considers the change in the number of insured workers in the rate year to estimate future costs. So as we go forward, if we estimate that you're going to have fewer workers in your industry, we're going to estimate lower costs. If you're going to have an increase, then obviously you'll see a corresponding increase in costs with an increase in FTEs. This creates greater stability and it's easier to understand, obviously. If your FTEs go up, then your costs are likely to go up. The third component is claims cost pooling. Cost pooling is when costs are spread amongst a larger group of employers. For example, certain costs may be allocated at the rate code level or amongst all employers. This increases collective liability so that a group of employers is not unfairly burdened by extremely rare and expensive claims. The old model pooled pension costs above $90,000, but only at the class level. So G code would pool pension costs above $90,000. B code would all pool pension costs above $90,000. And it was reallocated based on a fixed percentage of your payroll. So it's very limited protection against really expensive claims. The change is applying pooled level, so we'd be pooling all costs that are 3 times the maximum wage rate. And we see this as a better balance between industries being accountable for their own claims and collective liability of rare, high-cost claims. Costs in excess of 3 times the ultimate maximum wage rate are pooled at the board level and allocated back to industries based on the industry's proportion of costs. And right now the max is around $252,000, somewhere around there. Just over $252,000. So this does, by making this change, it increases collective liability, it improves our predictability, our ability to predict future costs, and it's increased transparency. It's easy to understand at what point you're going to pool costs, where those costs go, and then how they get reallocated back to your rate code. The fourth principle is the allocation of fatality costs. The old model averaged the costs of fatalities and allocated them equally to all rate codes based on a 10-year average. So it was 100% collective liability for fatalities. In the change that we made is all costs arising from fatalities are going to be charged to the rate code in which they occurred and will be treated like any other claim, which would be subject to that cap cost of claims, 3 times maximum insurable earnings. This increases fairness by holding rate codes and employers more accountable for the fatalities that are happening in their industry and moves away from the 100% collective liability associated with fatalities. The fifth principle or element of component of the enhanced rate model is long-term claims. So in projecting future costs, the old model considered costs paid out during the past 5 years of claims that occurred over the past 50. So you may have a claim that occurred 50 years ago, and if there were costs that we incur in this year, we'll capture those costs. The change, though, applies to all costs for the first 7 years of a claim to the industry experience. So now we only look at the first 7 years of claims experience, and we apply that to your industry experience. Remaining costs are pooled at the board level and allocated back to industry based on your proportion of costs. And part of the reason for that change is many industries, most, if not all industries, change over time. So the nature of injuries, the employers that are paying the premiums today often no longer exist. And so we're holding an industry accountable when, in most cases, they've made significant changes. The employers have changed. The way they handle health and safety has changed. So by pooling those, it's a better way of recognizing an industry's own experience, current experience. And at the board level, roughly 75% of claims costs happen in the first 7 years. So typically what we're pooling is roughly about 25% of claims costs. So this increases reactivity by putting emphasis on the most recent claims experience in your industry, and increases accountability for industries based on that most recent experience. But it also increases liability by pooling those old claims costs. The sixth component of the enhanced model is allocation of administration costs. The change here is an increase of the fixed component of administration costs from 10% to 30% to better align with how we actually allocate fixed and variable costs at WCB. So roughly 30% of our costs are related to activities such as human resources, IT, registration of employers, collecting premium rates, all those pieces that every employer would share a cost in. The variable costs are connected to employers that actually have claims. So roughly 30% are fixed costs, 70% are variable. The old model was 10% fixed, 90% variable, but that's not really the way our costs were structured. So what this means is an increased fairness, accountability, equity, incentive for prevention so that all industries appropriately share in the administration costs of WCB.
So can I just ask, what's the incentive on the part of workers' compensation to hold their costs down if you just suddenly jack yourself up by 20%?
Because our prevention department focuses most of its time on workplaces that have higher injury rates. So part of our basic admin costs is IT, employer services, prevention. So these are services that all employers share costs in. So if you drive down injuries, right? Two things: your variable costs are going to go down. If you drive down the 70%, if you drive down your costs and your injuries, you're going to pay less share of the variable costs. On the admin side, this is just a correction, meaning we never were, our fixed costs were never 10%, they were closer to 30%. This just reflects reality a little bit better. Did that explain?
Sort of.
Did I?
Well, no, because my question is, traditionally,
Yeah.
whenever we deal with organizations, there's sort of 10% is generally set aside for administrative purposes. Okay, when you sort of look, that's kind of globally how it's sort of traditionally done. But all of a sudden, you're kind of moving some of the variable. So now you're moving from like you're sort of capturing your administrative costs through the variable, right? And so now what you're looking to do is allocate everything under that administrative cost?
So the whole amount of administration, when we look at our administration, it's basically broken into two categories, fixed and variable. The variable would be all of our staff that deal with claims. So we take all the costs associated with our staff. So it is an administrative cost, but it's variable in a sense that we allocate the staff's costs to dealing with claims to those industries that are actually having claims.
Right, okay.
So there's a variable component to our administration, depending on who's having claims, but there's a fixed component in a sense that all employers, no matter how many claims you have, will share in that cost.
Okay.
So it's just keeping the lights on type of side of the business.
Okay. No, but you understand my point is that traditionally administrative costs would be allocated at around 10%. And now all of a sudden you're going from 10% to 30%.
So the same amount, it's the same amount.
Okay.
So the dollar amount isn't changing, it's the way we allocate it to each industry. And right now, if we look at our administrative budget, about 30% would be considered fixed costs, activities associated with fixed costs. Human resources, IT, registering employers, collecting premiums, things that we do every year that either help the organization just simply run and or that every employer participates in.
Okay.
The 70% is associated with the number of claims and the nature of the claims, how complex those claims are. So kind of claims costs.
Fair enough. No, that's good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question. Next slide. So the enhanced model was implemented for 2018, and it was after customer consultation. The board decided to transition impacts for those whose premium rates would increase under the enhanced model. So we went out to an outside agency, actuarial. They gave us recommendations on how to change the model and make it more fair, more reactive, improve collective liability, all those components that I went through. By changing the model, we are going to change the way, not the amount of costs that we need to collect, but the way those costs are allocated to industry. Some industries' premium rates went down, some are projected to go up. And for those that went up, we tried to meet with industry last year. We reiterated that message at the rate setting meetings. But we also felt like we needed to cushion that change, give industry about a year to try and manage and react to this change. So that happened. This is happening during 2018. The move to the enhanced model for some industries, I think 14 out of 50 would see increases as a result of the change to the new model. So out of 50 rate codes, 14 of them would potentially see some sort of increase. To mitigate the impact of those increases, like I said, WCB would draw from our injury fund to cover the costs associated with the transition. And again, this is for 2018 only. The board's funding from the injury fund to cover the difference between what an employer would have paid in 2018 with the enhanced model versus their actual 2018 final premium rate. Like I said, that cost came out of our fund. I think it was roughly $6 million. Is that the right amount? Roughly $6 million that we utilized out of the fund to try and cushion the change to industries that might see their injury rates go up or their premium rates go up in 2019, and then give industry time to think about it and do what they needed to do to deal with the potential change coming. So for those industries whose premium rate decreased under the enhanced model, they had their premium rate calculated exactly the way the model projected. And then starting in 2019, all industry premium rates will be determined under the enhanced model with no transition being provided. So to reiterate, the reason for holding these sessions, reinforcing it in our 2018 rate setting meetings and then holding these sessions, was to make sure that employers understand, have a sense of what might be happening in 2019. We don't want industry surprised by the changes when they get their premium statements in 2019. So here's an example of what we did in the transition. So the slide shows two examples of how rates were transitioned. The reason for the transition, again, was to give industries, employers time to adjust through 2018 to what you could be paying under the enhanced model in 2019. To be considered for transition, the premium rate under the enhanced model was higher than the 2017 final premium rate. Once a rate code was identified as a transition rate code, their premium rate for 2018 is determined in one of two ways. Either determined under the old model, or held to the 2017 level. So we tried to find a balance in terms of transitioning you in the best way possible. We didn't want, there was a couple situations where the old model was projecting a decrease and the new model was projecting an increase. Some of the feedback from industry is, don't decrease our premium rates, only have them go up next year. Give us a bit of a transition from where we're at to where we might be in 2019. So example one there, 2017 final premium rate of $1, increased to $1.30 under the enhanced model for 2018. So transitioning means we would continue to use the old model, and in this case it provides a premium rate that is higher than the 2017 final premium rate, so that industry premium rate is $1.20 for 2018. So we used the old model to try and come up with a premium rate that was somewhere between what you should have been paying and what you were paying. In example 2, increase under the enhanced model with no change or decrease under the old model. 2017 final premium rate was $1. It was to increase to $1.05 under the enhanced model for 2018. Transitioning in this case means holding the premium rate at the 2017 level, so that the industry premium rate would have been $1. So those are the two examples of how we transitioned the 14 rate codes. We did it in one of two ways to try and help cushion the change from the old model to the enhanced model. Next slide. So with this slide, industry impacts provided in this presentation are comparing the 2018 industry premium rates from the old model to the enhanced model. The intent of providing this information, again, is to educate on the model changes and provide potential impacts to employers. 2019 premium rates will be developed under the enhanced model and will include updated experience, which includes your 2017 cost experience. These premium rates will be available in October. Again, it's important to keep in mind that it is very difficult to isolate the impact of one recommendation on the industry premium rates. So when you look at the impact of the model that I'm going to show you, all these components are interrelated. You change one, you could impact a couple others. So it's the model itself, it's a system. It's extremely difficult to just isolate one component, but we've done that to illustrate what you might see in 2019. So here's what we're looking at. So had we implemented the enhanced model in 2018 for G12, the elementary and secondary education rate code, this is the premium rate we would have seen, and this is why, based on the various components. So this slide shows the difference between the 2018 premium rate using the old model and the enhanced model. So credibility, the first component there is about credibility. And basically what's happening here is your 10-year average is better than your 5-year claims costs, which causes a decrease in the costs under the enhanced model. So when we look at your 10-year costs, that combination of 5-year and 10-year costs to get you to a fully credible rate code, your 10-year costs were actually on average lower than your 5-year costs, and that caused your premium rate to potentially, that component to drop by 4 cents. By changing to the way we use indicators, under the enhanced model, note for the past 15 years, there's generally been decreasing time loss claims counts coupled with an increase in trend in claims costs. So even though claims have been going down, costs have been trending upward. However, in 2015, time loss claims started to see a bit of an increase. This means that using time loss claims caused the rate model to expect a corresponding increase in your claims liability. However, since 2014, so that's, if we would have looked just using time loss claims, the impact would have been an increase in liability. However, when we look at the workforce as an indicator, since 2014, the workforce has actually seen a slight decline. This means that using workforce will cause the rate model to expect a slight decrease in claims liabilities that's in line with the decrease in the workforce. Therefore, the adoption of workforce as an indicator of costs will decrease G12's premium rate. And the impact that we think it'll have, well, it would have had in 2018, was 13 cents. So by going from time loss claims as an indicator to workforce would have caused your premium, that component of the premium rate to drop by 13 cents. Claims cost pooling. Average pension costs so the way we used to do it was we'd look at pension costs over $90,000 and then pool it at the G code level amongst all employers in the G code. But your average pension costs were 41% higher than the G sector pension costs. So G12 used to benefit from pension pooling. Costs in excess of 3 times the maximum assessable earnings are actually 68% lower than the board average. Therefore, pooling costly claims would potentially increase your rate. So the amount that you're pooling at the all industry level, so in terms of your expensive claims, the amount that you're pooling at the industry level is roughly equal to the amount that you're being charged. So any of your claims that are over the 3 times cap, that amount that we're capturing and pooling at the board level, the amount you're being charged back is roughly equal, a little bit less, so therefore you're going to see a penny drop in that component. And then long-term claims. This is the big one for G12. And the long-term claims are really about the collective liability. And really, G12 has a smaller portion. So what's happening here is G12 has a smaller portion of costs in the long term. So all those costs over the first 7 years, they have a smaller portion of costs than what's the average at the board level. So you're putting less costs into the pooling and taking more costs out of the pooling due to collective liability. That's going to cause this component to increase by 23 cents. For a net effect, if we go to the next slide. So this slide shows an illustration of how your premium rate was transitioned. As you can see, the 2017 premium rate for G12 was $1.17. The old model produced a rate of $1.18 for 2018, and the enhanced model produced $1.23. The 5-cent difference is what we just walked through on the previous slide. The final rate for 2018 is $1.18. The rate from the old model. As the way the transition works is if both the old model and the enhanced model are increasing, the rate is based on the old model, the lower of the increases. This means that 5 cents was covered from the industry fund in 2018. So when you add up all those green and red bars at the end of the day, it came out to a 5-cent increase. We transitioned that amount in 2018. So if we go to the next slide. So what does this mean going forward? All things being equal, your 2019 premium rate would be $1.23, which is your 2018 premium rate under the enhanced model. But in order for that to happen, the claims costs and payroll for all industries would need to be the same, including yours, which we know won't happen as 2019. So the primary driver is going to be your experience, but don't forget we pool costs. So depending on whether those pooled costs improve or get worse, that could also impact your 2019 premium rate.
So your 2019 rate could be higher?
Could be, absolutely, than that 5 cents. Yep, could be lower too.
Going from 118 to 123 or higher for 2019?
Yes, you're going to, assuming you start at the $1.23. Good. If you go back a slide. So assuming all things were equal, it'd be $1.23. If experience gets worse, it could be higher than that. If experience is actually better, you could be lower than that. So just to reiterate, the 2019 premium rate is dependent on more than just your industry's own experience and payroll. If the board's overall experience worsens while an industry's experience improves, the industry, in theory, could still see an increase because of the pooling applied to costly claims and long-term claims. In addition to the industry's share of the risk, the industry share of the risk will be dependent on your ratio of costs, your own costs to the overall costs. That's how we reallocate the pooled costs. Now, we are trying to illustrate in some ways worst case scenario because we don't want people surprised. There is, not only could you see your premium rate increase because of the rate model change, as you pointed out, if the experience gets worse, you could see an additional increase. We want to be very upfront about that so that employers aren't surprised when they get their 2019 premium rate. Having said that, it could go down and you may see no increase from 2018 to 2019. We don't know at this point because we haven't fully captured all the 2017 costs yet in order to calculate the 2019 premium rates. So it's important to keep in mind that the updated experience will adjust how the rate model components respond, which will ultimately determine your 2019 premium rates. So what's next? Today's presentation is recorded and will be available on our website for, it says for a few days, but I'm guessing longer than just a few days.
It'll be up on our YouTube channel?
So it'll be on our YouTube channel for you to review. As you review the information presented today, you may have more questions. Go away, you may have more questions. Don't be afraid to contact us. I can leave my card. You can phone us, you can email us at askwcb@wcbsas.com, and we'll get back to you kind of as soon as you can, more or less within a working week. For those that are attending online, again, you can use the same email address. Just, you may need a day or two to absorb some of the information and think about it and get back to us with any questions that you have. For those online, if you have questions, feel free to submit them now, because we will be kind of taking questions at the end of the presentation. And another reminder that we always hold premium rate model sessions in October, where we go through in detail what your industry premium rates are going to be for the next year and why. Just a reminder that at the end of the day, ultimately what we pay in premiums is based on the experience that we have. And we can influence. We know this from dealing with employers and industries over the years. Many employers and many industries have seen significant decreases in their premium rates simply because they've kind of taken the bull by the horns and started to try and address injury prevention and effective claims management and rehabilitation. Our ultimate goal is mission zero: zero injuries, zero fatalities, and zero suffering. Injury prevention is the best way to minimize costs and human suffering. There's a saying that I've picked up from some of our friends in the German compensation system: prevention is better than rehabilitation, and rehabilitation is better than compensation. So anything we can do to prevent the injury from happening is obviously the most effective payoff and better for your workers. Once they're injured, anything we can do to rehabilitate them and get them back to meaningful, productive employment is better in the long run. At the end of the day, if that's not possible, then we will pay compensation to workers as long as we need to help them get through whatever impairments and or disabilities they suffer related to the workplace injury. So having appropriate safety programs in your workplace can be an effective tool in injury prevention. Return to work programs can help minimize costs and can influence your premium rates. And remember, there are resources out there to help you. There are industry safety associations. WCB has account managers that can talk to you about your premiums and costs and things that you could do to help manage those maybe better. We have our WorkSafe website, which offers online training, online resources, and then we do have classroom training. So there are a number of resources out there and available that can potentially help employers like yourselves deal with preventing injuries from happening and or managing those injuries once they do happen. So with that, I will now turn it over. So thank you for your attention to this sometimes confusing but important topic and information. So this brings the formal part of the presentation to a close, and we'll now open the session to questions. So we'll try and alternate. If there are a bunch of questions, we'll try and alternate. But at the end of the day, if we only have one person with 10 questions, we'll answer all 10 questions. And if you'd rather speak to myself one-on-one after we've got about, I think, an hour, and I'm more than willing to talk to you if you have a question related specifically to this or even something different after the presentation.
Just a question regarding the rates. Oh, sorry. If the industry that you're in, so you're pooling all those rates, right? So if your specific school or facility has had no lost time claims or WCB injuries, if that industry goes up, your premium is still going to go up. Is that correct?
Your base rate will go up. If you have no claims or significantly better than the industry, you're still going to get experience rated downwards. So We group employers. There's a kind of a three-step process that ultimately tells us what premium you'll pay as an employer. First, we group employers into like industries, which is yours is the G12 rate code. Then we apply the rate model. What's the base premium rate all employers in that rate code are going to pay? Then the third step is experience rating. And that's a matter of kind of fairness and accountability. So if your costs and injuries at the end of the day are lower than everyone else's, you're going to receive up to a 30% discount in your premiums. On the flip side, some employers, if they have significantly poor experience, they could pay as high as 200% higher than the base rate. And we have several employers in different rate codes that are paying 200% perennial.
Great, thank you.
Yep. I don't know. Educators usually aren't shy, so you can't have any questions. And if you do, feel free to come and talk to me after. So with that said, I would really like to thank everyone who was online and those that took the time in the day to come out and participate in this. We appreciate it, and hope the rest of your day goes well, and stay safe. Thank you.